The night sky above Denver cracked like broken glass. "Dr. Sarah?" Chen dropped her coffee mug as the ceramic shattered against her observatory floor. Through the telescope's viewfinder, she watched reality tear itself apart. What had been empty? Space moments before now, blazed with impossible light, a wound in the fabric of existence itself, bleeding colors that had no names. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the telescope's focus. The tear in space widened, revealing something beyond a glimpse of stars, arranged in patterns that defied every law of physics she knew. Then they came through. 7 figures emerged from the cosmic wound, floating down toward Earth with movements too graceful for human anatomy. Even from miles away, Sarah could see they were wrong. It's too tall, too fluid. Their bodies moved like water, given form, and when they turned their heads, she caught the glint of eyes that reflected light like mirrors. The radio on her desk crackled. "To life. All stations. This is NORAD. We have 7 objects. Descending toward Colorado Springs. Military personnel, are the transmission cut to static." Every electronic device in the observatory went dead. The only light came from those 7 beings as they descended like fallen angels, their forms growing clearer with each passing second. Sarah watched through her mechanical telescope, the only instrument still functioning as they landed in the field below her observatory. When their feet touched the ground, flowers bloomed instantly in perfect circles around each figure. The grass grew taller, greener, more alive than anything she'd ever seen. One of them looked up at her window, across the impossible distance. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Sarah Chen knew her life and the lives of every human on Earth would never be the same. ##. Chapter 1. The witnesses, the creature standing in Sarah's observatory, defied every scientific principle she'd spent her life defending. It had simply appeared beside her telescope, moving through the locked door as if walls were merely suggestions. "Dr. Chen," it said, and its voice carried harmonics that made her bones vibrate. "We have been watching you for some time." Sarah pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Up close, the being was even more unsettling. Its skin held a subtle luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath translucent marble. Its features were human-like, but perfected beyond nature's intents, petrichal to an uncomfortable degree, with proportions that suggested beauty while triggering an instinctive revulsion. "What are you?" she managed to whisper. "We are what you will become," it replied, tilting its head with mechanical precision. "My designation is KL 7739. I am here to collect you." "Collect me for what?" "To witness the truth." Before Sarah could protest, the world dissolved around her. She found herself standing in what appeared to be a vast amphitheater, made of crystalline walls that pulsed with soft light. 6 other humans stood nearby, all wearing the same expression of terrified confusion she imagined was on her own face. There was Marcus Webb, the Marine she recognized from news reports about the Middle East conflict. His combat uniform was rumpled, and his hand kept reaching for a sidearm that was no longer there. Beside him stood Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the geneticist whose research on human evolution had made headlines just months ago. Her lab coat was stained with what looked like coffee, suggesting she'd been taken from her work. The others were strangers, a young woman in a nurse's uniform who couldn't stop shaking, an elderly man in farmer's overalls, clutching a worn baseball cap, a teenager with paint-stained fingers who kept glancing around like she was looking for an exit, and a middle-aged woman in a business suit who was speaking rapidly into a phone that clearly had no signal. "Where are we?" the businesswoman demanded, finally giving up on her phone. Aboard our vessel came a new voice. Another being materialized before them, taller than KL 7739, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. "I am designated Prime 1. You have been selected to receive knowledge that your species is not yet ready to accept, but which circumstances now demand we share." Aka stepped forward, his military training overriding his fear. "You can't just kidnap people. There are laws. Your laws are constructs of a primitive civilization," Prime 1 interrupted. "In 3 of your years, such concepts will be irrelevant. Your species stands at the threshold of transformation, and you must choose your path wisely. Transformation into what? Dr. Tanaka asked, her scientific mind already working despite the impossibility of the situation. Prime One gestured, and the crystalline walls around them became transparent. They gasped collectively as they saw Earth far below, but it wasn't the Earth they knew. Continents had shifted. Oceans glowed with bioluminescent life. Cities stretched into the sky like crystal forests, and the aurora borealis danced across. The entire planet's surface in colors that made their eyes water. This is your world in the year 5000 AD, Prime One explained. This is what humanity becomes when it makes the correct choice. The elderly farmer, who'd introduced himself as Jake Morrison, stepped closer to the transparent wall. That's 3,000 years from now. You're saying you're from our future? We are from one possible future, Prime One corrected. But your timeline has reached a critical junction. The path you take in the next 3 years will determine whether this future comes to pass, or whether humanity destroys itself before achieving transcendence. Sarah found her scientific skepticism. Battling with the evidence of her senses, this is impossible. Time travel, evolution on this scale, it violates everything we know about physics. Biology, your understanding of physics is 2 hours as a child's drawing is to architectural blueprints. Kale 7739 interjected. Your biology is constrained by assumptions that will soon prove false. You think in terms of linear progression? But evolution can leap forward in quantum bounds when the proper catalysts are introduced. The teenager, who'd identified herself as Maya Chano, relation to Sarah, despite the shared surnames, her hand tentatively. What kind of catalysts? Prime One's expression, what passed for an expression on its fluid features, grew solemn. The same forces that could elevate your species could also annihilate it. Your governments are already experimenting with technologies they do not understand. Genetic manipulation, quantum consciousness transfers, artificial intelligence integration. They believe they are creating weapons, but they are actually unlocking the keys to transcendence. Nurse Emily Rodriguez, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. But why us? Why show us this? Because each of you represents a crucial element of human society, Prime One explained. Science. It gestured to Sarah and Dr. Tanaka. Military. Strength, a nod toward Marcus. Agriculture and traditional wisdom. Jake straightened under the attention. Healing and compassion. Emily's nursing badge caught the light. Art and creativity. Maya's paint-stained hands flexed nervously. Commerce and organization. The businesswoman, Linda Hayes, looked uncomfortable with the classification. You will return to your time with this knowledge, Prime One continued. What you do with? It will help determine whether humanity chooses evolution or extinction. But as the being spoke, Sarah noticed something troubling. In the reflection of the transparent walls, she could see that each of the evolved humans was casting multiple shadows. Shadows that didn't align with any light source she could identify. And those shadows seemed to move independently, reaching toward the assembled humans with what looked like hunger. Whatever these beings were telling them about humanity's future, Sarah realized, they weren't telling them everything. Hashash, Chapter 2. The choice revealed. The evolved beings led their human captives deeper into the vessel, through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves with each step. Sarah tried to map their route, but the geometry made no sense. Walls curved into impossible angles. Doorways opened onto spaces that should have occupied the same coordinates but clearly didn't. Your three-dimensional thinking limits your perception. Kale 7739 explained, apparently reading her confusion. This ship exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. What appears as impossible architecture to you is simply efficient use of space. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a holographic display that showed Earth's timeline stretching from the present into the far. Multiple branching paths split from the year 2025, each leading to radically different outcomes. Behold the nexus point, Prime One announced. Your species stands here. Pulsing light indicated their current year. From this moment, 5 major paths diverge. The first path showed humanity spreading across the stars in great ships, but their faces were twisted with aggression. Their cities built on the bones of conquered alien civilizations. The second path revealed Earth as a wasteland, its surface scorched and lifeless, with only scattered underground colonies clinging to existence. The third showed humanity merging with machines, becoming something that was no longer recognizably human beings of metal and electricity that had lost all capacity for emotion or art. The fourth path was the beautiful future they'd seen earlier, the crystal cities, the luminous oceans, the evolved humans moving with impossible grace. The fifth path simply ended in darkness. The fifth path is extinction, Prime One explained. Complete annihilation of your species within 50 years. It is the most likely outcome based on current trends. Dr. Tanaka stepped closer to the display, her scientific mind analyzing the projections. What determines which path we take? 3 critical decisions, Prime One replied. The display zoomed in on their current timeline. The first occurs in 18 months. Your governments will discover something they call the Genesis Protocol, method of rewriting DNA at the quantum level. They will face a choice: use it as a weapon, or recognize it as the key to transcendence. Marcus frowned. I've never heard of any Genesis Protocol, because it has not been discovered yet. Kale 7739 said. But it will be. Dr. Elizabeth Warren at the CDC will make the breakthrough while investigating a viral outbreak in Southeast Asia. The virus will appear to be natural, but it will actually be humanity's first contact with quantum genetics. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're talking about deliberately introducing a pandemic? Not deliberately. The virus exists naturally in your timeline, a remnant of an ancient genetic experiment by a previous intelligent species on Earth. Your archaeological dig sites have already disturbed several dormant samples. The outbreak is inevitable. Morrison, the farmer, looked troubled. You said there were 3 decisions? What are the other 2? Prime One gestured, and the display shifted. The second choice comes 2 years from now. Humanity will make contact with another intelligent species. Us, but beings from your contemporary era. They will offer technology and alliance, but their motives are not what they appear to be. Humanity must choose whether to trust them or rely on its own development. And the third choice? Linda Hayes asked, her business-trained mind already trying to calculate probabilities and outcomes. The third choice is the most crucial, Prime One said solemnly. It occurs in exactly 3 years. By then, some humans will have begun evolving in response to the Genesis Protocol. Your species will face the ultimate decision: embrace evolution and transcend your current limitations, or cling to your primitive nature and ensure your extinction. Emily, the nurse, had been studying the evolved beings intently. But there's something you're not telling us? I can see it in the way you move, the way you look at us. This isn't just about saving humanity, is it? Prime One's features shifted, what might have been the equivalent of a surprised expression. You are perceptive. I work with dying people, Emily said simply. You learn to read between the lines when someone isn't telling you the whole truth. About a terminal diagnosis. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Prime One spoke again. The transcendence process is not without cost. To evolve as we have evolved, humanity must sacrifice certain aspects of what you consider your essential nature. What aspects? Sarah demanded. Individual consciousness, Kale's 7739 answered. In our time, the concept of self as you understand, it no longer exists. We are nodes in a collective intelligence, more efficient, more capable, but no longer truly alive, Maya said quietly. That's why your shadows move wrong. You're not really individuals anymore, are you? Just ... extensions of something bigger. The evolved beings exchanged what might have been glances. The collective consciousness is a form of immortality, Prime One said.
Oh.
Death becomes meaningless when individual identity is an illusion. But so does life, Marcus said grimly.
Ow.
Asking us to help humanity commit a form of species suicide. We are asking you to help humanity survive, Prime 1 corrected. The alternative is complete extinction. Maybe extinction is better than becoming hollow copies of ourselves, Jake said stubbornly. Dr. Tanaka had been silent during this exchange, but now she stepped forward. There's another option, isn't there? He said there were 5 paths, but you've only explained 4 in detail. The third path, the machine merger. That's not random, is it? That's your backup plan. Prime 1's silence was answer enough. You're not just from one possible future, Sarah realized. You represent one faction from that future. There are other evolved humans who chose the machine path, and you're in conflict with them. The Machine Collective seeks to preserve humanity by replacing flesh with technology, Kale 7739 admitted. They believe consciousness can be maintained while enhancing capability. We believe consciousness itself is the flaw that must be transcended. And both of you are trying to manipulate our timeline to ensure your version of the future becomes reality, Linda said, with a businesswoman's clarity. This isn't about saving humanity. It's about winning an ideological war, using the past as your battlefield. The evolved beings' forms began to shimmer, their perfect composure finally cracking. The Machine Collective's agents are already active in your time, Prime 1 said urgently. Humanity for integration. If you do not choose transcendence, you will inevitably choose mechanization. Or, Marcus said. Raising his rifle, Sarah hadn't even seen him acquire it. We choose option 3, telling both versions of our future. To go to hell and finding our own path? Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The holographic display flickered and showed new information. Another vessel approaching. Its design radically different, all sharp angles and metallic surfaces where the evolved human ship was curved and organic. The Machine Collective has found us, Kale 7739 said. Its perfect features showing what might have been fear. They seek to prevent this conversation. Good, Emily said firmly. Maybe it's time the past had a conversation with both versions of its future. The ship shuddered as something struck its hull. Through the transparent walls they could see boarding pods extending toward them like mechanical tentacles. Why choose quickly, Prime 1 urged. Accept transcendence willingly, or face forced mechanization. Sarah looked around at her fellow captives and saw her own determination reflected in their faces. They were being asked to choose between 2 forms of extinction, the death of individuality or the death of humanity itself. But maybe, just maybe, there was a third option that neither future had considered. The boarding pods breached the hull. With a sound like thunder, and mechanical beings began pouring into the ship, unlike the evolved humans with their organic perfection. These Machine Collective agents were clearly artificial humanoid frames of advanced alloys and synthetic materials with optical sensors that glowed red in the dim light. Humans of the 21st century, one of them announced, its voice a perfect reproduction of human speech, despite clearly being artificial. We are here to offer you salvation through integration. Do not let these biological extremists deceive you with promises of transcendence. True immortality lies in the marriage of consciousness and technology. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin, and somehow, 7 people from the present had become the most important pieces on a chessboard that spanned 3,000 years. Chapter 3. The War Between Futures, the Machine Collectives. Boarding party moved with inhuman precision, their metal feet clanking against the organic floor of the evolved human ship. Sarah watched in fascination and horror as the 2 groups of post-humans faced each other across the crystalline chamber. Designation, Sigma Prime, announced the lead mechanical being, its red optical sensors focusing on Prime 1. You have violated temporal accords by direct intervention. These primitive humans belong to our jurisdiction. Your mechanized mockery of existence has no jurisdiction over the birthright of consciousness. Prime 1 replied, its fluid form beginning to glow with bioluminescent patterns. These humans will choose transcendence. They will choose survival, Sigma Prime countered. Integration offers immortality without the loss of individual identity. Your path leads only to the dissolution of self. Sarah realized that she and the other 6 humans had become spectators to an argument that had probably been raging for centuries in the far future. But Marcus, ever the soldier, wasn't content to remain passive. "Hey!" he shouted, raising his mysteriously acquired rifle. "Both of you, shut up. I can hear you just fine. And guess what? We don't want either of your futures." Both factions turned their attention to the humans. The mechanical beings tilted their heads in unison, a disturbingly synchronized movement. "Explain your alternative," Sigma Prime requested. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, her scientific mind working rapidly. "You both assume that evolution is binary, either biological transcendence or technological integration. But evolution is actually about adaptation and diversity. Maybe humanity's future isn't about choosing one path, but about preserving the option to choose multiple paths." "Impossible," Kale 7739 interjected. "The universe has finite resources. Only one approach can achieve true sustainability across galactic timescales," says who? Maya challenged, her artistic mind seeing patterns the others missed. "You're both thinking like post-humans." "You've forgotten what it means to be gloriously, chaotically, unpredictably human," Emily nodded enthusiastically. "In medicine, we call it biodiversity. The strongest populations are the most genetically diverse. Maybe humanity's strength isn't in becoming uniform, either organic or mechanical, but in becoming more diverse than ever." Jake the farmer chuckled. "Any fool who's worked the land knows you don't plant just one crop. Disease, weather, pests, something's bound to wipe out a monoculture eventually. You need variety to survive," Linda, ever practical, was already thinking in terms of implementation. "From a systems perspective, you're both creating single points of failure. The collective consciousness fails if the collective is compromised. The machine integration fails if the technology is corrupted. But a diverse humanity with multiple evolutionary paths would be harder to destroy completely," Sarah finished, understanding dawning. "It's not about choosing the best path. It's about keeping all paths open." The two factions of post-humans seemed genuinely startled by this concept. They exchanged communications in frequencies too high for human ears to detect, but the tension in the room was palpable. "Your proposal has merit," Sigma Prime finally admitted, "but it would require unprecedented cooperation between our factions. Something we have been unable to achieve in 3 millennia, Prime 1 added grimly. "Because you're not human anymore," Marcus said bluntly. "You've optimized yourselves out of the ability to compromise, to make messy, irrational, beautifully human decisions." The ship shuddered again, but this time not from an attack. Alarms were sounding throughout the vessel, and the holographic display was showing something alarming. Earth's timeline was fracturing. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded.
"Temporal
paradox," Kale 7739 explained urgently. "Our presence here, combined with the machine collective's intervention, is creating cascade effects. Multiple timeline branches are colliding. On the display, they could see versions of Earth's future overlapping and interfering with each other. In some, evolved humans danced through crystal cities. In others, mechanical beings built perfect geometric structures that stretched to the stars. But in most, the interference patterns were creating chaos timelines where evolution stopped and started randomly. Where technology advanced and regressed in impossible cycles, where humanity fractured into warring subspecies that eventually destroyed themselves. "We have to get back," Emily said urgently. "If we stay here much longer, we might not have a future to save." "Agreed," Sigma Prime said. "But first, you must make your choice. Will you guide humanity toward integration or transcendence?" "Neither," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to guide humanity toward being human messy, diverse, adaptable, and free to choose their own evolutionary paths. That path leads to chaos," Prime 1 warned. "Maybe," Jake said with a grin, "but it's our chaos. And sometimes chaos is just another word for possibility." The evolved beings and mechanical beings began another high-frequency communication, but this time their body language suggested negotiation rather than confrontation. "We propose a compact," Sigma Prime announced. "Our factions will withdraw from active intervention in your timeline. In exchange, you 7 will serve as guides. You will help your species navigate the critical choice points without forcing them toward either extreme? What's the catch? As Linda asked suspiciously. Catch, Prime 1 said solemnly, is that success is not guaranteed. The path you propose, maintaining human diversity while avoiding extinction, is the most difficult of all possible futures. It requires wisdom, courage, and sacrifice from every generation. And if we fail, Maya asked, both our futures die with yours, Kale 7739 admitted. The timeline paradox we have created means that our own existences now depend on humanity finding a third path. Sarah looked around at her 6 companions: a soldier, a scientist, a farmer, a nurse, an artist, and a businesswoman. They were ordinary people facing an extraordinary choice, but maybe that was exactly what humanity needed. We accept, she said, speaking for all of them, but we do this our way. No more time travelers, no more manipulation. Humanity gets to choose its own future, messily and chaotically and beautifully. The post-human factions began the process of returning them to their own time. But as the chamber filled with the same impossible light that had first brought them aboard, Sigma Prime spoke one final warning. The first test comes sooner than we originally calculated. Dr. Warren's discovery of the Genesis Protocol will happen in 6 months, not 18. And the viral outbreak that triggers it, has already begun. The world dissolved around them, leaving 7 humans with the weight of 3,000 years of future balanced precariously on their shoulders. Chapter 4. The return. Sarah materialized, back in her observatory, but something was wrong. The coffee mug she'd dropped was still on the floor, unbroken. Her equipment showed no sign of the electromagnetic pulse that had disabled everything. According to her instruments, she'd been gone for less than 3 minutes? But the knowledge in her head was real. The weight of what she'd learned pressed against her consciousness like a physical force. Her secure phona, device she'd never owned before but somehow knew how to use, buzzed with an encrypted message. Meeting point, Denver Museum of Nature. And Science 0800 tomorrow. Come alone, man Marcus. No. They'd all been equipped with the tools they'd need to communicate securely. Sarah suspected this was a parting gift from their post-human visitors. The next morning, she found herself in the museum's planetarium with 6 other people who looked as disoriented and determined as she felt. They sat in the dimmed auditorium while a recording about stellar formation played overhead, providing cover for their conversation. Anyone else hoping this was all a really weird dream? Emily asked quietly. Such luck, Marcus replied grimly. I've got classified intel downloading into my brain about military projects that don't officially exist yet, including something called the Genesis Protocol. Dr. Tanaka looked pale. I've been checking the medical literature. There are reports of a new viral strain in Southeast Asia. It started 3 days ago. The symptoms match exactly what Prime 1 described. So we're really doing this, Linda said, her business mind already working on organizational challenges. 7 people against 2 factions of post-humans and whatever other forces are trying to manipulate humanity's future. Not against, Jake corrected. We're not fighting them. We're fighting for the right to stay human while still becoming something better. Maya had been sketching in a notebook, her artistic mind processing their experience visually. I keep thinking about what they showed us, all those possible futures. Even the good ones looked empty somehow. Like humanity had won by becoming something else entirely. Maybe that's the point, Sarah said slowly. Maybe the reason neither future could solve their own problems is because they stopped being human enough to understand what problems were worth solving. Marcus stood and began pacing old military habits. Okay, so what's our mission? And don't say save humanity. I need something more specific than that. Dr. Tanaka pulled out a tablet and began typing. Short term, we need to monitor Dr. Warren's research and make sure the Genesis Protocol is used for evolution, not as a weapon. Medium term, we need to prepare for first contact with that other alien species. Long term, we need to guide humanity through the choice between transcendence and mechanization. all while making sure we don't lose what makes us human in the process. Emily added, Linda was already thinking in terms of resources and logistics. We're going to need funding, connections, and a hell of a lot of luck. I can handle the financial and organizational aspects, but we need to be smart about this. Too much attention, and we become targets. Speaking of targets, Marcus said grimly, anyone else notice we're being watched? Sarah followed his gaze to the museum's upper level, where a figure in a dark coat was observing them through binoculars. When they spotted the attention, the figure quickly moved away. Machine collective or evolved humans? Maya asked. Neither, Marcus said. Government. Probably been monitoring unusual activity since the temporal disturbance 3 days ago. Jake muttered, as if we didn't have enough to worry about. Dr. Tanaka's tablet chimed with an urgent alert. The viral outbreak in Southeast Asia just went pandemic. The WHO is calling an emergency session. Dr. Warren's team is being deployed to investigate. Then it begins, Sarah said quietly. Over. The following weeks, the 7 unlikely guardians of humanity's future began their work. Sarah used her astronomical connections to monitor space for signs of the approaching alien contact. Marcus leveraged his military network to keep tabs on weaponization programs. Dr. Tanaka positioned herself to influence the genetic research community. Emily worked to prepare medical systems for the changes coming to human biology. Maya began. Creating art that would help people visualize positive futures without losing their humanity. Linda established shell companies and funding streams to support their efforts. Jake started a network of agricultural communities that could serve as genetic preserves for unmodified humans. But 6 months into their mission, they made a disturbing discovery. The timeline's still fracturing, Sarah announced during one of their secure video conferences, detecting temporal anomalies all over the globe. Whatever the evolved humans and machine collective did by bringing us into their conflict, it didn't stabilize when they withdrew. Meaning, Marcus asked? Meaning we might not be the only ones who remember that ship, Dr. Tanaka said grimly. If the temporal paradox is spreading, other people might be getting glimpses of possible futures. And not all of them are going to make the same choice we did. Emily had been monitoring social media and news reports. There's been a surge in doomsday cults and technology worship groups. People are having prophetic dreams about mechanical angels and organic gods. The future is trying to stabilize itself, Maya realized. But instead of one clean timeline, it's creating factions in the present that mirror the conflict in the far future. Linda pulled up financial data on her screen. Investment in genetic research has increased by 400% in the last month. Military technology stocks are through the roof, and there are rumors of secret societies forming around something they call the Great Choice. Jake, from his farm in Nebraska, looked worried. I've been hearing things from other agricultural communities. There are groups trying to stockpile seeds and preserve pure human genetics. They're calling themselves purists, and they're not friendly to the idea of any kind of evolution. So now we're dealing with at least 4 factions, Marcus summarized. The pro-machine integration groups, the pro-biological transcendence groups, the anti-evolution purists, and us. 5 factions, Sarah corrected grimly. Because I'm pretty sure there are people who want to accelerate toward extinction just to end the uncertainty. Dr. Tanaka's expression was grim. Dr. Warren Mater. Breakthrough yesterday. The Genesis protocol is real, and it works. But there are already 3 different groups trying to steal her research, to claiming they want to use it to evolve humanity, and one that wants to weaponize it. Time for Phase 2, Emily said quietly. What's Phase 2? Maya asked. Sarah stood, looking out at the night sky where she'd first seen the tear in reality. Phase 2 is where we stop trying to guide humanity's choice and start showing them what their choices really mean. But as she spoke, new lights appeared in the sky, not the organic tear the evolved humans had created, but geometric patterns. That suggested mechanical origin. The machine collective hadn't withdrawn as completely as they'd claimed, and somewhere in Southeast Asia, Dr. Elizabeth Warren was about to make a discovery that would force humanity to confront its future much sooner than anyone had planned. The real war for humanity's future was just beginning. ###. Epilogue. The choice eternal 1 year later. The emergency session of the United Nations had been called for 3 p.m. Eastern Time. But by noon, crowds had already gathered outside the building. Some carried signs reading "Evolve or Die," while others declared "Preserve human purity." A few simply asked, "What are we becoming?" Inside the General Assembly, Dr. Elizabeth Warren stood at the podium with 7 advisors flanking her, though most of the assembled delegates didn't know that these 7 individuals had been instrumental in shaping the last year of human history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Warren began, 15 months ago, we discovered what we now call the Genesis virus. What began as a pandemic that threatened to destroy humanity has instead revealed humanity's potential to consciously direct its own evolution. On the screens around the assembly hall, data showed the remarkable changes that had begun manifesting in infected populations: enhanced cognitive abilities, increased disease resistance, a longevity that seemed to stretch toward immortality. Also, more subtle changes, alterations in brain structure that suggested new forms of consciousness were emerging. "The virus isn't killing us," Dr. Warren continued. "It's offering us a choice. We can guide the evolutionary process, or we can let it guide us. But we cannot stop it." Sarah Chen, sitting in the advisors section, watched the delegates' faces. As they absorbed information that would have seemed like science fiction just 2 years ago, some looked terrified. Others showed signs of barely contained excitement. A few appeared to be calculating how to weaponize or monetize the revelation. "The question before us today," Dr. Warren said, "is not whether humanity will evolve. The question is whether we will evolve together, or whether we will fracture into subspecies that may eventually view each other as enemies." Marcus Webb, now serving as a special military advisor on post-human security concerns, stepped forward. "Intelligence reports indicate that several nations have already begun attempting to weaponize evolutionary technology. Others are trying to suppress it entirely. Both approaches are not only futile but dangerous." Dr. Yuki Tanaka took her place at the podium. "From a biological standpoint, we're witnessing something unprecedented, a species becoming capable of consciously directing its own development. But evolution isn't a destination, it's a process, and processes require diversity to remain stable." Linda Hayes, who had used her business connections to establish the Global Evolutionary Ethics Council, addressed the economic implications. "The cost of trying to control human evolution will bankrupt nations. The cost of ignoring it could be extinction. But the cost of embracing it wisely, could be the greatest investment in humanity's future ever made." Emily Rodriguez had been working with the World Health Organization to establish treatment protocols for evolutionary variants. "We're seeing children born with capabilities we don't fully understand yet. Enhanced pattern recognition, intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics, the ability to perceive electromagnetic fields. They're not superhuman. They're just ... more human than we thought was possible." Jake Morrison's agricultural networks had become crucial for maintaining genetic diversity as humanity began to branch into new variants. "Nature doesn't put all her eggs in one basket," he said, in his plain-spoken way. "Neither should we. As some folks will choose to enhance themselves, some will choose to stay as they are, some will find middle paths we haven't even imagined yet. All of them deserve protection and respect." Maya Chenhu had taken her adoptive surname to honor the connection. She felt with Sarah had spent the year creating art that helped people visualize positive evolutionary futures. "Fear makes us want to choose one path and force everyone else to follow it. But evolution is about exploration, not optimization. We need to stay curious about who we might become, not terrified of who we might stop being." Finally, Sarah herself stepped to the podium. "A year ago, 7 of us were given a glimpse of possible futures. We saw timelines where humanity transcended its biology but lost its soul. We saw futures where we merged with machines but lost our capacity for chaos and creativity. We saw paths where we destroyed ourselves rather than face change." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of every nation on Earth. "But we also learned something that neither the evolved humans nor the machine collective from our far future understood: The best way to honor what humanity has been is to remain open to what humanity might become. Not one thing, but a beautiful, diverse, chaotic symphony of possibilities. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. It never could have been, given humanity's wonderfully fractious nature. But it was decisive enough. The Global Evolutionary Accords were signed by 147 nations, establishing frameworks for protecting evolutionary diversity, preventing weaponization of genetic technologies, and ensuring that no single vision of humanity's future could suppress all others. But the real victory wasn't in the treaty rooms or legislative halls. It was in the children being born who could perceive colors that had no names, in the artists creating works that spoke directly to enhanced neural pathways, in the farmers developing crops that responded to human emotional states, and in the ordinary people who faced the extraordinary choice of what to become and chose to remain beautifully, chaotically human. 5 years after first contact with the future, Sarah stood in her new observatory built with materials that bent light in ways that would have been impossible before the Genesis breakthrough, watching the night sky. But she wasn't alone. A small group of children, some evolved and some baseline human, gathered around her as she pointed out constellations. "Tell us about the time travelers again," asked Zara, an 8-year-old whose eyes could perceive infrared radiation and whose mathematical intuitions operated on quantum principles. "Were they really scary?" added Tommy, a baseline human child whose imagination had been sparked by stories of possible futures. "They weren't scary," Sarah said thoughtfully. "They were complete. They had solved the puzzle of survival, but they'd forgotten why survival was worth the effort." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his hair now showing gray, but his bearing still military straight. "Field report," he said with mock formality. "The Antarctic colony just made contact. Dr. Chansevin, the evolved variant living in the ice cities. They've developed art forms based on crystalline harmonics. Apparently, their sculptures sing in frequencies that can induce euphoria in baseline humans." Emily emerged from the facility's medical wing, where she'd been examining a new type of human-plant hybrid that was emerging in some tropical regions. "The symbiotic variants are stable," she reported. "They're not losing their humanity, they're just expressing it through partnership with other life forms." "Any word from the machine integration communities?" Sarah asked. "Linda's latest report says they're thriving," Marcus replied. "Turns out when you let people choose technological enhancement voluntarily instead of forcing it, they keep the parts of themselves they value most. The integrated humans are more creative than either of our future visitors expected." Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the communication system from her research station in orbit. "The space-adapted variants just sent their first cultural transmission. Back to Earth? It's beautiful. They've developed ways of thinking that incorporate zero gravity and three-dimensional movement into their philosophy. They're still recognizably human, but they're becoming something new." Maya's laughter could be heard from the art studio she'd established in the observatory's lower levels. She was working with a group of evolved children whose synesthetic abilities allowed them to paint with sound and sculpt with electromagnetic fields. The basement had become a riot of impossible colors and sculptures that existed partially in dimensions baseline humans couldn't perceive. Jake's voice crackled over the radio from his expanded agricultural preserve. "The purist communities are doing fine too," he reported. "Turns out preserving baseline humanity isn't about rejecting change. It's about maintaining the genetic and cultural foundation that makes all the other changes possible. They're the root system of the human tree." "Any problems?" Sarah asked. "The usual," Marcus replied. "Some conflict between communities that chose different evolutionary paths. A few extremist groups still trying to force their vision on everyone else. The occasional time traveler from various futures trying to correct our timeline." "But," Sarah prompted, hearing the satisfaction in his voice, "but we're handling it. Turns out, when you give people the right to choose their own path, most of them are pretty reasonable about letting others choose different paths." As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar distortion appeared in the air above the observatory. But this time, instead of the organic tier created by the evolved humans or the geometric portal used by the machine collective, the opening was chaotic, multicolored, and somehow joyful. 3 figures emerged. But they were unlike any of the post-humans they'd encountered before. One appeared to be a blend of evolved human and machine integration organic curves, flowing seamlessly into technological enhancements. Another seemed to shift between different evolutionary variants as they moved, as if they contained multitudes within a single form. The third was recognizably baseline human, but carried themselves with a confidence that suggested they had chosen their form deliberately rather than accepting it by default. "Greetings from the year 7847, the shifting figure said in its voice. Contained harmonics that suggested it was speaking in several different evolved human languages simultaneously. "We represent the confluence of the civilization that emerged from the path you chose." "Let me guess," Sarah said dryly. "You're here to tell us we made the right choice, and everything works out perfectly." The baseline human laughed a sound of pure, unenhanced human joy. "Actually, we're here to thank you for making the difficult choice. The messy choice. The choice that preserved our right to keep choosing. Your timeline created something neither the Transcendence faction nor the Integration faction achieved." The hybrid being explained, "A sustainable diversity. A way for intelligence to grow and explore without losing the creative chaos that makes growth possible." "Are you saying we won?" Akis asked suspiciously. "Because if the last 5 years have taught me anything, it's that anyone claiming victory is probably missing something important." "Not one," the shifting figure corrected. "Survived, thrived, continued. The universe is vast and full of challenges that require every kind of intelligence we can develop. Transcendent collective minds are good at some problems. Integrated human-machine intelligences excel at others. Baseline humans with their chaotic creativity solve problems neither of the others can even perceive. And the evolved variants and the symbiotic humans, and the space-adapted communities, and all the other paths humanity is exploring," Emily asked. "Each one essential," the baseline human from the far future replied. "Each one contributing something unique to the symphony of consciousness that humanity becomes across the centuries." But Sarah said, because her scientific mind insisted on looking for the catch, "There must be problems, conflicts, challenges we can't even imagine yet." "Oh, absolutely," the hybrid being said cheerfully. "Humanity never stops being human, no matter how much it evolves. You still argue, compete, make mistakes, and occasionally try to destroy each other. But you also still love, create, sacrifice for each other, and find new ways to be beautiful." The children who had been listening to Sarah's stories gathered around the time travelers, their evolved senses picking up information that the adults couldn't detect. "They smell like starlight," Zara observed. "And like the color of music," Tommy added, his baseline human imagination proving as capable of impossible perceptions as any genetic enhancement. "They feel like home," whispered a third child one. Of the symbiotic variants whose plant-enhanced nervous system could detect emotional resonances across species barriers, the time travelers began to fade, their presence becoming translucent. "One last gift," the shifting figure said, and suddenly the minds of all 7 original witnesses were filled with a brief glimpse of the far future, not the sterile perfection of the evolved humans or the geometric precision of the machine collective, but a vast, chaotic, beautiful tapestry of intelligence in 10,000 forms spread across a galaxy, where every star system was home to a different expression of humanity's potential. "Remember," the baseline human called as they disappeared. "The choice isn't made once. It's made every day by every person, and every moment they decide who they want to become." The portal closed, leaving the observatory filled with the ordinary magic of a group of friends who had accidentally saved the future by refusing to let anyone else define what salvation should look like, so Maya said, emerging from her studio. Covered in paint that seemed to shift colors in impossible ways, "What do we do now?" Sarah looked around at her 6 companions, now family, really, and then at the children whose futures they had fought to keep open. And finally up at the stars, where humanity was already beginning to spread in ways that honored both its origins and its infinite potential. "Now," she said with a smile, "now we keep being human. Messily, chaotically, beautifully human. And we help everyone else do the same, no matter what form their humanity takes." Outside, The night sky sparkled with possibilities, and somewhere among those stars, the children who had listened to their stories would grow up to make choices that would shape the next chapter of humanity's endless, beautiful, impossible journey into tomorrow, the future. It turned out wasn't a destination to reach or a problem to solve. It was a choice to make. Over and over again, with every dawn of every new day, and humanity, in all its myriad forms, chose to keep choosing.